I'm going to read a section out of Journey to the Dark Goddess, How to Return to Your Soul. It's a piece out of the Descending into the Underworld section of the book called My Own Inanna Story, Descending. For my own descent of Inanna, it was unseasonably cold, a late spring. It rained coldly. I was sleeping in a tent, and the hall we had transformed into a temple was rustic and chilled. Around us the Australian bush dripped, its mists and grey-green colours dulling the exterior world as we plunged deeper and deeper into the mythos of Suma, of the goddess Inanna, and her unseen counterpart, Ereshkigal. For each day of 7 days, 1 day for each gate, we sat, mostly in silence, and created our own versions of Inanna's regalia. For the first gate we made crowns. Mine was bracken and silver cardboard with a crescent moon. On the second day we made small bead necklaces, and on the third, a long double strand of beads, using dark blue beads that mimicked lapis lazuli. On the fourth day we made breastplates. Mine was yellow satin-covered cardboard with tiny silver stars. On the fifth day we made arm bracelets. From twisted copper wire, I made a serpent that coiled around my upper arm, its head extending down towards my elbow. We made measuring rods and lines on the 6th day. I chose a tall green reed and trimmed it with narrow ribbons threaded with feathers, beads, and silver stars glued onto the ends. On the 7th day we made robes. Mine was a caftan from heavy, blood-red fabric with a silver star over my heart. Each day we began with a temple invocation and a prayer to Inanna. One morning I was chosen to read the prayer. As I stood facing the altar with the book in my hands and began to speak, I felt a voice speak through me. The words shifted around in my mouth. The emphasis changed. The places where the pauses arrived were not chosen by me, and I would have placed them elsewhere. I felt I was speaking through time, from an impossibly distant time, and that the words had a life in them, in this context, that was beyond me, beyond my powers of interpretation or imagination. I felt they were subtly altering me, refining me as I spoke them, that they retained a power that had not been diluted, merely laid aside for a few thousand years. From the 4th day, Ereshkigal was included in our prayer. As the days went by, she got louder and louder. We began to understand that Ereshkigal was the purpose of this whole journey. Ereshkigal was where we were headed, and it was Ereshkigal's story we were discovering as much as Inanna's. After 5 days we spoke a prayer to Ereshkigal and included Inanna. It became clear that the whole descent is in service to Ereshkigal. The myth is known as the descent of Inanna, but really it could, perhaps it should, be called the descent to Ereshkigal. We began as a temple of Inanna. We became a temple of Ereshkigal. After we had completed our journeys, we took on the title of priestesses of Inanna Ereshkigal, and that Ereshkigal's name came second did not imply that she had the secondary role, but the underlying one. Each day, after we'd made our sacred adornments, we stood in meditation, while one by one we descended through a symbolic gate. We crossed a line held between 2 women, one of whom removed the item from us that we had just made. We spoke the ritual line of Inanna's, "What is this?" and received the unvarying answer, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect and may not be questioned." For 6 days in a row, I heard this spoken 20 times, 1 time each day for each woman. Not only that, I heard the voices of Inanna, her voices of outrage, shock, pride, fear, despair, arrogance, beauty, power, hope and desperation, varying through the days, through the women. I heard them coming out of my own mouth. I heard them travelling into the underworld from where I stood in meditation, eyes closed on one or other side of the gate, waiting for each one of us to travel through. I was going to write to travel safely through, but it wasn't safe. As we made each item of Inanna's regalia, we meditated on what it meant to us. Thus, Inanna's crown for one woman might be her job, or her inspiration, the achievements of her life, or her children. The breastplate might represent her security in the world, her beauty, the love she felt for and received from others, her health. The beads might be her singing voice, the threads that tied her to friends, family and community, or her hopes for the future. Those voices I heard, voices cracking, shouting, whispering, disbelieving, shocked, appalled, were the voices of women losing those things suddenly, unexpectedly. Her children, her future, her choices, her direction in life, her lover, her creativity, her health. My crown on the first day represented knowledge, and I felt untouchable when they removed it, that nothing could break me. The small strand of beads on the second day, that was my voice, but I never spoke much anyway, and I remained proud when they removed it. The third day's double strand of beads was my compassion, and I felt even further isolated, estranged, when I lost it. My breastplate of the fourth day represented my vulnerability, that which allowed me to take a lover, to show myself to another, and I felt only coldness when they lifted it from me. The fifth day's armband I thought of as my sexuality, my fertility, bound together in that twisting of a snake along my arm. I felt a long way down by then, and it was a quiet horror to have it removed. I cannot even keep that, my birthright as a woman. But I did not protest, other than in the ritual words. I remember that I carried my measuring rod and line with magnificent pride. It represented my pen, my words, the actual lived power of my writing. To me it was magical, the power of my magic, and I gave it a name. My words are fire, are blood, are earth, are star. When they slid it upwards, out of my hand, so simple, so fatal, I could hardly breathe, hardly speak. It had not occurred to me while I was making it or carrying it that I would lose it, or what that would mean. I had not even tried to hold on to it, to clutch at it. It was already gone by the time I thought of it. The words came from me distantly. What is this? And I heard, inevitably, quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. Then I tore apart. For all my arrogance, this. For all my confidence, my pride, my self-containment, my delicate seclusion from the world, this. Utter loss. All that I had lost before, all that I had given away, crashed down on me. Not just Inanna's regalia, but all of my losses. Relationships. The agony of ill health which I had suffered, first with arthritis, then with RSI and glandular fever. The loss of friendships, opportunities, choices I had turned away from, all crashing down on me. Everything turning on the loss of my words, my writing. Are they so precious then, these little interfaces of mine with the world, that without this I am nothing? In everything, in every descent, there is a point. Without this, I am nothing. And then there is a pause, and the process continues. So, I am not nothing, after all. So, even beyond this loss, that loss, all the losses, imaginable, still I am, still I keep going. Recognizing oneself in this stripped form, is an essential part of descending. Oh, so I am still here. I cannot have been that thing that was me, after all. The following day I made my robe in silence. Then I sat up that night, writing and meditating in a little space that had been set aside for us. The 20 of us were descending one by one into the night. We began as soon as it was dark, and my turn came at about 1 in the morning. I had stayed awake. Others slept or wept or gazed inwards. Someone had coiled a thick rope into a spiral, spaced widely enough to walk. I had clothes, blankets, a light. I was in a daze with knowing this was the last of something. Other women came and went, meditated for a while or slept, and every 20 minutes or so one of us would be called to do her descent. It had occurred to me, somewhat dimly through the fog that had descended, that the person behind all this, so to speak, was Ereshkigal, and I was going to meet her. I went back and checked the myth. Certainly, Inanna met with Ereshkigal. She would be there, and I, in the guise of Inanna, would be there. I could ask her what all this meant. I could hold her accountable for these actions and losses, and I intended to. I would demand an answer. I went through the gates full of purpose. The temple was darkened, lit by candles. There was a sense of vague shapes, of purpose moving about in the background. There were 7 gates, shrouded in draperies, constructed in the hall, and at each one I was stopped. "What is this?" I asked at each gate, disdainful, righteous, fearful, and each time was answered with, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." On I swept, through gate after gate, knowing I was going somewhere, imagining the answers lay just ahead. I would ask Ereshkigal what it meant, why she was doing this. When they removed my robe at the last gate, I crawled through, naked and bowed low, as it says in the story. As I began to stand, I caught sight of Ereshkigal, distant on her throne, in the dim light, and I opened my mouth. It's on page 73.